At the Minnesota Council on Latino Affairs, we are celebrating our 45th anniversary. Estamos de manteles largos, as we say in Spanish, and we are very proud to share with you our journey. As we celebrate our present achievements, we recognize that we also stand on the shoulders of many before us.
And we propose legislation that is still in the books, benefiting the community.
And we became advocates for them in their communities as well.
At the end of the 1970s, the Spanish-speaking Affairs Council established itself as the first ethnic council in the state of Minnesota. Let's hear some testimonies from the council's founders as they envisioned this project.
Since its creation in 1978 by legislative mandate under Governor Rudolph Perpich, MCLA has advocated for Latino civil and human rights, access to affordable housing, access to quality education and health, youth development, and equality in Minnesota.
My name is Jose Trejo, and I was the first director of the council. At that time, it was called the Spanish-Speaking Affairs Council. I was born in Mexico and moved to the United States at the age of 12. Now, the council was created because prior to the council, there were two organizations that served the Latino community. The first one was Migrant Affairs Council, and the Migrant Affairs Council was terminated by the legislature in 1976. And in turn to that, the governor created the Governor's Office of Spanish-Speaking Affairs, and I was selected as the director of the office. We felt that being just an office under executive order would not assure the existence of the council into the future if the governor changed or something else happened, because the governor could terminate it at will. So we decided to change the office to a council. And we went to the legislature and we made those changes, and it passed in the first year, which was very good for us.
Before MCLA's inception, the Latino community in the state was already organized. Community leaders were active creating the Chicano and Latino studies at the University of Minnesota and addressing community needs with initiatives like La Clínica Community Health Center, ACER, Centro Cultural Chicano, Centro Legal, and CLUAS, among others. But in 1978, they rallied together to form a groundbreaking organization.
We developed partnerships. We created additional resources for the community, and we proposed legislation that is still in the books, benefiting the community.
I was the first staff assigned to Jose Trejo at the Spanish-Speaking Affairs Council. The council was started to mobilize the Latino community in the state and become more relevant and more resourceful for our community. And the legislative initiatives were very challenging, but we were very successful. The leadership of Jose Trejo was amazing. He organized the community statewide. When I started at the council, he assigned me to do the outreach in all those communities, Moorhead, Albert Lee, all the small communities that had generations of Latinos, Mexicanos living there. Communities in Minneapolis, St. Paul, West Side, Albert Lee, Duluth. And so we did that research, we cultivated them, and we became advocates for them in their communities as well.
Mexican Americans, Chicanos, and Puerto Ricans successfully advocated to create a public institution to advise the governor and legislator and shape policies to address inequities in our community. They named it the Spanish-Speaking Affairs Council, becoming a leading entity across Minnesota and inspiring the creation of the other two ethnic councils.
We really did an intentional outreach to mobilize our communities. Many of them were undocumented, and so we needed to be careful so that they can build trust. And I really believe that the sincerity, the integrity of the council was what made it happen.
The council was born out of a collective desire to address systemic changes faced by the Latino community, especially newcomers and workers whose first language was Spanish. They were trying to navigate a new system, learn a new language, and find employment. The council believed in their potential. What began as a small group of passionate individuals became a powerful force of incremental change.
Representation is important. The first known Latino to serve in the Minnesota legislature was Conrado Vega. He ran for the Senate and was elected in 1976. He represented Districts 52 and 39 from 1977 to 1987. This decade also saw Irene Gomez-Bethke become the first Latina to be appointed in the executive branch as a commissioner, leading the Minnesota Department of Human Rights.
At the end of the 1980s and the beginning of the 1990s, the council continued growing roots and making an impact at the legislature and in the community. The council changes its name to the Chicano Latino Affairs Council, or CLAC. Let's hear how its work made a unique imprint in the state of Minnesota.
In its early years, the council focused on establishing connections with community partners. As demographics changed and Latinos became more diverse, so did the agency, and its name changed to Chicano Latino Affairs Council. As CLAC, the organization continued its focus on quality education, workers' conditions, migrant workers, and funding for English as a second language programs.
In the decade of the 80s, the majority of the community was mostly Mexican American, or several generations of Mexican community who was established mostly in St. Paul and Minneapolis. When I came as a Central American from Guatemala, it was a change of diversity that started occurring mostly by the middle of the decade of the 80s. When I came to Minnesota in 1981, there were approximately 32,000 Latinos in the state. And by the end of the decade, by the 1990s, there were 55,000 plus. And we always said, plus the ones that are undercounted. So it was extremely important for us to provide access to the newcomers, but also to create a lot of opportunities that provided equity and provided access for the Latino community in many ways.
The council worked on legislative reforms, such as recruitment practices in the food processing industry, interpreter certification, and improving school curricula for students of Mexican origins, and collaborated with the St. Paul Public Schools to reduce the high dropout rate among Latino students.
My family has been here since 1925, and so we have been seeing over the decades more and more Latino immigrants coming into our community. And I think in terms of MCLA working on not only in the Twin Cities, which is where my family is, but also in greater Minnesota to make sure those folks that did not have as much of a connection to the Twin Cities where a lot of information resides, it was so important that people knew what their rights were.
Another remarkable project was the Latino Youth Conference that the council organized to prepare Latino youth for leadership and personal growth. Kids from all over the state came together for networking and learning opportunities.
The Minnesota Latino Affairs Council was instrumental during the decade of the 80s and then therefore the 90s and so forth, to be part of that transition of demographic change. There was also geographic change where people started more settling in the rural areas. So it met a lot of need, a lot of gaps that the community faced at the time. And certainly the work was, for me personally, a great training ground to really incorporate my personal fight against inequities in Minnesota.
Two executive directors served during this decade, Eduardo Wally and Margarita Zalamea. Edwina Garcia became the first Latina elected to the state legislature in 1991, representing districts 40A and 63B until 1998. Carlos Mariani was elected to the House and served from 1991 to 2023 in District 65B.
The end of the 1990s and the beginning of the new century saw a robust movement for immigrant rights in the nation and the state, centering on undocumented residents, their contributions to the state, and the need for policy changes at the state level.
Entering the new millennium, CLAC remained active, increasing civic education through voter registration, census participation initiatives, and entrepreneurship. CLAC focused on entrepreneurship and collaborated with economic development agencies to support Latino businesses. CLAC also presented to the state legislature on the need for and importance of a comprehensive immigration reform plan.
Let's hear what some of our leaders tell us about this decade.
During my time at MCLAC back in the year 2000, the Latino population was about 3% of the Minnesota population, which was about 143,000. Then I know that when I left the council in the year 2010, we did increase more to close to about 350,000 people in the state. And I want to say we probably were about 4.5% of the Minnesota population.
During the 90s, with the addition over tens of thousands of new arrivals, bringing with them culture, but also entrepreneurship, and also a culture of politics. As many people come from places where we have historical fights to get our voices heard. That confluence of desire to bring businesses, the confluence of bringing politics to the forefront, and the old guard, I would say, not that they're all, but the leadership that already had built, the maturity, helped us start to move things forward. And I think from that time to now, we are a more mature community in terms of how we even approach policy or the visibility that we get. To me, those achievements cannot be made possible without all of the groundwork and the many years of the Minnesota Council for Latino Affairs advocating on the behalf of the Latino community.
In the early 2000s, CLAC supported the creation of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Before the installation of the Consulate of Mexico in St. Paul in 2005, the Council also helped coordinate and receive the visit of the President of Mexico, Vicente Fox. CLAC also produced research around Latino health disparities, the Latino arts, and businesses.
CLAC did an excellent job, or MCLAC now, in communications. At that time, the Spanish newspapers and also Spanish media, we were trying to get to educate our community about civic engagement, about voter registration, about the economic development, education, and of course, later on, when I left the council, we were preparing for things that were coming on board, such as the DREAM Act. Also, the form of Latino Lead, for example, was another thing that we were planning. So those were also very great outcomes that we have for the council. So very active staff.
Two directors served during this decade, Itmar Santiago and Rogelio Munoz. For the first time, a Latina leader was elected to the state Senate, Senator Patricia Torres Rey, serving from 2007 to 2012 in District 62 and 2013 to 2023 in District 63. Agustin Willie Dominguez was elected in the House of Representatives and served one term from 2007 to 2008 in District 58B.
The Latino population continues to grow and establish itself, increasing its voting potential. A significant percentage of Minnesotanos are immigrants, but the vast majority of Latinos are U.S. born. Let's hear more from public servants and leaders about the council's work during this decade.
During this decade, the Council continued raising awareness and visibility about the contributions of Minnesotanos to the state. In partnership with the Minnesota Humanities Center, CLAC implemented two innovative programs: the Absent Narratives and Community Programs to tie Latino arts and culture to the state's economic development. The programs showcase the past, present, and future contributions of Latino culture on Minnesota's economy and character through DVDs and public television programs. In legislation, the Council also supported the passage of two important pieces of legislation: the Minnesota DREAM Act, which provides higher education opportunities such as in-state tuition and scholarships to undocumented students, and the LEAPS Act, which increased emphasis on English learner support by recognizing the value of students' proficiency in their native language as an asset.
When I came to the board, there was a mandate by the legislation to either restructure, change, dismantle the boards, and we were in legislation for all that session in my first year, and we created a new board, new restructured board, and we were working very focused on four areas: education, health, immigration and civil rights, and economic development. It was a new direction, and we were having a lot of meetings, but our only goal was to serve the community. We wanted to understand what their issues were and bring those issues to legislation. And then when the governor and the legislators wanted to know what was important to the community, we knew what was important. We worked with the community and we worked with the legislators and the governor.
In 2015, the state legislature changed the council's legislative statute and its name. Since then, the council is known as the Minnesota Council on Latino Affairs. The new statute directed the agency to focus less on programming and more on legislative and policy work, advising both state government and legislature, and serve as a bridge between the community and government services.
The community has grown exponentially, not just in the Twin Cities area, but in every corner of the state. And the council has had a very important role to play, whether it's in rural Minnesota, suburban Minnesota, or the Twin Cities. All the congressional districts are represented in the board of the council, which really gives us an opportunity to bring the voices of those individuals in those regions to the council. So for me, as a former senator, it was very important to connect with this council, not just to hear the perspective of my community, but also to represent the voices of the Latinos across the state. As a Latina state senator, people always came to my office to look for support first in my office, because we had a connection that really was rooted in our culture and our language. So I felt like I was la senadora for all the 67 counties, and that gave me really the opportunity not only to work with the council very directly, but also to see the value that this council plays in, all of the areas where our community is represented.
Three directors served in this decade: Rogelio Muñoz, Hector Garcia, and Henry Jimenez, while three more Latina and Latino leaders were elected to the state legislature: Senator Melissa Lopez Franzen, who represented District 49 from 2013 to 2023. In 2022, she became the first person of Latino heritage to lead a caucus in the state legislature. John Kosnick, District 58A, and Eric Lucero, District 30B, were elected to the House of Representatives in 2015 and were re-elected in 2023. Eric Lucero now serves in the State Senate, District 30.
In the last 5 years, the growth and visibility of Minnesotanos, particularly our youth, have translated into important changes that will have a long-lasting impact in Latinos' overall well-being. Let's discover the role played by the Council in partnering with the community.
Before the COVID-19 pandemic hit, MCLA made one of its main priorities in education, addressing the teacher shortage in the state by co-leading various iterations of the Increased Teachers of Color Act, ITCA, legislation.
So I live in Greater Minnesota in Rochester, and one thing that has changed is that the Latino community keeps growing and flowering and just being more present in our community. I am very proud to be able to be an educator in the schools and to have someone that the students can connect with, that can understand them, and that can be a role model for them. When I walk the halls in the schools now, there's lots of beautiful Latino faces everywhere. And so it's important to take into consideration the needs of these students so that they can be successful and so that we can meet their needs so that they can be contributing members of our society.
Following the pandemic outbreak and the global protests for racial justice of 2020 that hit Latinos unequally, MCLA shifted its focus to support the emergency plans to address the multiple challenges faced by the community to access bilingual information and resources to get tests, vaccines, and other government-related services. The Council visited various localities to hear directly from the community about the impact that both crises and produced a report documenting their stories and testimonies.
What I'm most proud of in our work is coming up with the strategic framework, and that happened right before the election in 2021. I was first elected chair, and we came up with that framework. That framework not only entailed and guided the council and its staff on doing research, but we also tasked ourselves into how do we better connect with the different organizations with our community so that when the time comes and that window of opportunity opens to pass amazing legislation, we can hit the ground running, support the organizations doing that work, and at the end come out, finally see that light at the end of the tunnel and successfully win great policies for the Latino community in Minnesota.
After the pandemic, we understood that culture preservation and community development go hand in hand. Celebrating our traditions is very important for us to heal and have a sense of belonging. MCLA collaborated with Neomuralismos de Mexico to organize the first ever installation of an altar to celebrate Dia de los Muertos at the state capitol, leading to an official proclamation by Governor Walz.
If I had to choose one word to describe MCLA and its work, I would say harmonic. It takes a lot to not only listen to the community organizations, and as well as speaking with the governor's office, speaking with the legislatures, and then coming up with legislative priorities and an agenda, and then being able to not only execute that, but passing that on to the governor's desk for him to sign it. That takes a lot of harmony, a lot of coordination, and definitely a lot of skill too. So I would say harmonic.
2023 has been a landmark for a more inclusive and equitable legislation. But over the last 5 years, the Council has been instrumental in the passage of ITCA, anti-wage theft legislation, funding for regenerative agriculture, a new hair technician license, and tax credits for ITN filers. The Council was also proud to support advocates in their fight for driver's licenses for all and healthcare for all, joining the fight to include our undocumented neighbors, family, and friends in policy and legislation.
4 new legislators with Latino Hispanic ancestry were elected in the past 5 years. Representative Aisha Gomez, elected in 2018 and representing District 62B. Dr. Alicia Mann, House Representative from 2019 to 2020 in District 56B, and now Senator representing District 50. Newly elected Maria Isa Perez Vega, House Representative in District 65B, and Alicia Kozlowski, House Representative in District 8B.
On behalf of our council members, thanks for being part of this journey. We appreciate your continued interest and involvement and invite you to learn more about the council's work to create a more inclusive and equitable Minnesota. Check out our website for more resources and historic documents. Our name has changed over time, but our purpose remains the same: advise and inform on legislation and policy with Latino Minnesotans. Muchas gracias.
I am very proud of the work that I did in the council, especially in creating additional resources for the community, passing important legislation, and developing leadership.
In the years to come, I expect that will be much more greater, that will have much more resources, more people entering government. That would mean much more success than what we already see.
So I'm very proud of the work that the council has done through the decades. Very proud of this celebration of their existence, because it's important that we celebrate and pat ourselves in the back. And my congratulations to the council for continuing to serve not only the leadership in the board, but also the leadership of the staff, because that has evolved and continues to grow. So congratulations on the 45th anniversary, MCLA.
I think the work that they have done is so important because we as Latinos need a strong, articulate voice on public policy, on public practices, and everything that government does.
To me, those achievements cannot be made possible without all of the groundwork and the many years of the Minnesota Council for Latino Affairs advocating on the behalf of the Latino community. So thank you and congratulations.
Well, congratulations, MCLA, for all the great work that you do for all of us in Minnesota. And I know we have much, much more exciting things and legislative issues that we have in our state and our communities that I know you will excel in. Congratulations again.
What I want to say here is congratulations to the members who worked 45 years with us in this MCLA, and si se puede, thank you, and let's keep it going. Let's move it up.
Congratulations, MCLA, on your 45th anniversary. This is important work. People like me cannot do our work without the work of the people that came before us. We are able to keep working for equity and for access to many services, including education in my case. And that fight is because other people have opened the doors, and we are able to keep doing the work that's done in the past 45 years. So thank you to everybody that's done this important work during this time.
Congratulations to the Minnesota Council on Latino Affairs. 45-year anniversary, that is huge. Not a lot of organizations make it that far, but to even look at our timeline and see that we've been doing that work for 45 years, that the state has put their trust into our council and to the other ethnic councils as well, to be able not only to talk with the community, but to be able to report back to the governor's office, to the legislature, and let them know the different solutions that would work for different communities.
Muy buen trabajo y feliz aniversario.